In the spring of 2015, an experienced 32-year-old hiker named Michael Harris embarked on a solo journey along the Appalachian Trail. Before stepping onto the path, he sent a final message to his sister, a text that would be the last anyone ever received from him. His sudden disappearance left his family in a state of suspended grief, holding onto the hope of his return while authorities tirelessly searched for any clue. Despite extensive investigations, years passed without any answers. But then, 8 years later, a twist of fate occurred when a group of campers stumbled upon a shocking discovery that would reignite the long cold case. It was a crisp morning with a thick mist hanging over the Smoky Mountains, as Michael Harris stood in the Klingman's Dome parking lot adjusting his gear. At 32, he was an experienced outdoorsman who had hiked these trails many times, but this particular trip felt different. As he was about to set off, his phone buzzed with a message from his sister, Sarah. "Be safe out there. Call me when you get back to town." Michael quickly replied, "Don't worry if you don't hear from me tonight. Service is bad out here." He then put his phone away and began walking toward the trailhead. That message, sent at 8:47 a.m. on April 15, 2015, would be the last time anyone heard from him. The Appalachian Trail stretched ahead, a narrow strip of dirt disappearing into the dense forest. For weeks, Michael had looked forward to this solo hike, a much-needed break from the stress of his desk job in Boston. His plan was straightforward: spend 3 days hiking and camping, then head back to civilization. On that first morning, he exchanged pleasantries with other hikers he passed. A retired couple from Tennessee, whom investigators would later interview, remembered him well. He was tall, athletic, and wore a red baseball cap with a blue backpack. They noted that he seemed to be in good spirits and appeared happy. By midday, Michael had covered 5 miles. He paused at a scenic overlook to drink water and check his notes. He was right on schedule. His plan was to camp near Charlie's Bunyan that night and then continue toward the town of Gatlinburg the following day to get supplies. As the day wore on, the trail became less crowded. Michael fell into the familiar, steady pace of a seasoned hiker, his mind finally beginning to relax from the months of urban pressure. As evening approached, he started looking for a good place to set up his camp. Although the official rules required him to stay in designated camping areas, Michael knew the area well enough to find a quiet, legal spot away from the main trail. He turned off the main path, following a faint trail that led to a small, secluded clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. It was the perfect spot. With practiced ease, Michael set up his tent and built a small fire to warm water for his dinner. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow through the trees. For the first time in a long time, he felt a deep sense of peace. He took out his journal, a habit he kept on all his trips, and began writing by the light of the fire. Day 1 complete. Legs feel good, weather holding. This is exactly what I needed. The fire crackled softly as an owl hooted in the distance. He finished his journal entry, banked the fire's coals, and crawled into his tent, falling asleep almost instantly. He couldn't have known that before the sun rose again, everything would change. Sarah Harris felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach as she checked her phone for the 20th time on Wednesday, April 18th. It had been 3 long, silent days since her brother, Michael, had last texted. He was a meticulous planner, a responsible hiker who always checked in when he said he would. He should have been back in Gatlinburg by now, but his phone went straight to voicemail with every call. Sarah's mind raced, rereading his last message, a casual, "Don't worry if you don't hear from me tonight. Service is bad out here," which now felt like a foreboding last word. The following morning, unable to bear the gnawing uncertainty any longer, she made the call to the Sevier County Sheriff's Office. "My brother's missing," she told the dispatcher, her voice strained. "He was hiking the Appalachian Trail and was supposed to be back yesterday." Deputy Kevin Martinez took down the initial report, gathering the basic details. A 32-year-old male, an experienced hiker, last known location somewhere between Klingman's Dome and Gatlinburg. The deputy's tone was professional but not yet alarmed. Hikers frequently went off schedule. Trail conditions could change, or they might simply decide to take a more leisurely pace. "We'll start making some calls," Martinez assured her, promising to check with trail hosts and see if anyone had seen Michael. By Friday, however, the mood had shifted. The initial calls had yielded nothing. Michael's credit cards showed no activity, his bank account was untouched, and his phone remained dead. The official search was launched on Saturday morning. Sevier County search and rescue teams were deployed along the section of trail Michael had planned to hike, armed with his detailed itinerary, a precaution Sarah had always insisted he take. Trained dogs were brought in, picking up scent trails in several places, but recent heavy rain had washed away much of the evidence. Helicopter crews flew in meticulous grid patterns over the dense forest canopy. From the air, the mountains looked vast and impenetrable, a sea of green where a person could vanish without a trace. On the ground, search teams moved with painstaking precision through the wilderness. They found plenty of signs of human activity: old fire rings, scattered food packaging, discarded litter, but nothing that could be definitively linked to Michael. Then, on the third day of the search, they found something that gave them a sliver of hope. A volunteer named Tom Bradley, while exploring about 2 miles off the main trail, discovered a recent fire pit. He knelt down, examining the debris scattered around it, and called out to his team leader. "This mac and cheese," he said, holding up a partially burned package. "It's the same brand that was on the missing hiker's supply list." The teams quickly converged on the site, meticulously photographing and bagging every piece of evidence. They brought in cadaver dogs, but the dogs found nothing. Lab analysis of the food packaging was inconclusive. The brands were too common, sold in every grocery store. It could have been Michael's campsite, or it could have belonged to any of the countless hikers who traveled through those woods every month. The search continued for 2 more grueling weeks. Volunteers from hiking clubs across the Southeast joined the effort. Sarah drove down from Boston, spending 18-hour days coordinating with search teams, posting flyers in every trail town, and pleading with local media to keep her brother's story alive. But the mountains gave up no secrets. The first supposed sighting came 3 weeks after Michael disappeared. A gas station clerk in Hot Springs, North Carolina, 40 miles from where Michael vanished, called the sheriff's office. He was certain he'd seen the missing hiker, a tall guy in his 30s wearing the same red baseball cap from the photo. The clerk told Deputy Martinez the man had bought snacks and asked about trail conditions heading north. Sarah's heart leaped with a desperate surge of hope. Maybe Michael was alive, disoriented, perhaps suffering from amnesia. Search teams were immediately redirected toward Hot Springs, but they found nothing. 2 weeks later, another sighting. A fisherman near the French Broad River swore he saw a man matching Michael's description walking along the riverbank at dawn with what looked like hiking gear. Again, search teams mobilized, and again, they found nothing concrete. These sightings became a recurring theme throughout the summer. Michael was spotted in Asheville, seen hitchhiking near Johnson City, and rumored to be living rough in the woods outside Damascus, Virginia. Each report sent Sarah on an emotional roller coaster of hope and crushing disappointment. Investigators diligently followed every lead, checking homeless shelters, hospitals, and police departments across 3 states. Michael's photograph was distributed to hundreds of law enforcement agencies, and his story appeared on missing persons websites and social media groups dedicated to finding lost hikers. Still, nothing ever panned out. In August, 4 months after Michael's disappearance, a breakthrough seemed to come from an unexpected source. A fisherman named Dale Morrison contacted police about something he had found 2 weeks earlier but hadn't thought to report. "I was fishing downstream from where the search teams were looking," Morrison explained. "Found a hiking boot caught up in some rocks. Looked new, expensive. I just didn't think about it until I saw that missing hiker story on the news again." Morrison led investigators back to the spot along Cataloochee Creek, but the boot was gone, likely carried away by the current. The search team scoured the creek bed for days, finding only more debris and litter. Meanwhile, armchair detectives on internet forums began dissecting every detail of Michael's disappearance. Some theorized he had staged his own vanishing to escape financial problems, a theory Sarah quickly debunked by releasing his bank statements, which showed a healthy savings account and no significant debts. Others suggested he had fallen victim to one of the legendary predators rumored to lurk in remote corners of the Appalachian wilderness. The wildest theories involved everything from Bigfoot to alien abduction. Sarah watched the online discussions with growing frustration. Her brother had become a public mystery, a puzzle for strangers to solve. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had answers. By autumn, the organized searches had largely ended. Sevier County kept the case open, but resources had to be allocated to new emergencies. The mountains had swallowed Michael Harris completely, and winter was fast approaching. Sarah, however, refused to give up. She organized volunteer search weekends, offered a reward for information, and kept Michael's story alive on social media. But as months turned into a year, then 2, then 3, even she began to face the terrible possibility that her brother might never be found. The case went cold, and the mountains held onto their secret. Michael Harris's vanishing act in 2018 made him just another number in the grim tally of people who go missing in America's vast, wild landscapes. The National Park Service notes that while some are found, many others are discovered by chance much later, and a significant portion are never seen again. Michael's case file grew old at the Sevier County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant Martinez, who was a deputy back then, couldn't shake the memory of the failed search. The mystery of what happened to Michael was a knot he could never untie, a case that haunted him. Meanwhile, Michael's sister, Sarah, had returned to her life in Boston, but a part of her stayed behind in those Tennessee mountains. She couldn't bring herself to clear out his apartment, paying the rent on a place that was a shrine to his last moments of normalcy. His hiking boots waited by the door, and trail maps covered the kitchen table, marked with journeys he never took. Every few months, she would call Sergeant Martinez. The calls were always the same. No new leads, no new clues, no sign of Michael. Martinez was always gentle but honest, reminding her that after all this time, the chances of finding Michael alive were practically gone. Over the years, the Appalachian Trail claimed more missing hikers, each new case reigniting media interest and reminding everyone of the other unsolved disappearances. Michael's story became a cautionary tale in online hiking communities. Experienced hikers debated what could have happened: a medical emergency, a fall, an animal attack, or foul play. The theories were endless, but the proof was non-existent. Some people who hiked in the area where Michael disappeared reported strange things: weird noises, the feeling of being watched, and gear that mysteriously vanished from their camps. Most people dismissed these tales as just the product of an overactive imagination in a lonely, dark forest. Yet, some former searchers couldn't help but wonder if there was some truth to the stories. The spot where Michael vanished had always felt different, heavier, and more isolated than other parts of the trail, despite being close to popular tourist spots. Tom Bradley, a volunteer who had found the mysterious fire pit back in 2015, couldn't let go of the case. He regularly hiked those same mountains, driven by an obsession to find an answer. He spent weekends exploring off-trail routes, searching for any hint of what had happened. His wife worried, and his friends thought he was wasting his time, but Bradley felt a responsibility to keep looking. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic led to a massive increase in people hitting the Appalachian Trail, as city dwellers sought refuge in the outdoors. The trail saw more foot traffic than it had in decades, yet still, no one found anything related to Michael Harris. Sarah posted on social media to mark the 5th anniversary of his disappearance, and the post was widely shared. The 6th anniversary saw fewer shares, and by the 7th, most people had forgotten about the hiker who had simply disappeared. The mountains held their secret tightly. As 2023 began, Michael's case seemed destined to be another of those cold cases that occasionally resurfaced in true crime shows. Sarah, finally seeking a path to healing, started seeing a therapist to help her find closure without answers. She was at last ready to clean out his apartment, planning to donate his hiking gear to a local outdoors club. She knew Michael would have liked the idea of his equipment helping others discover the wilderness he loved. But just before she could pack up his life, the mountains finally revealed their long-held secret. Months of meticulous planning went into the camping trip that Jake Peterson and his girlfriend, Riley Chen, had been eagerly anticipating. Seasoned hikers, they decided to tackle the backcountry trails of the Smoky Mountains. April offered the ideal conditions, pleasant weather and fewer people than the summer months would bring. After 2 days of hiking, they decided to leave the marked path to find a more isolated spot to set up camp, away from other hikers. Riley spotted what looked like an open area about 50 yards from the main trail, hidden among the trees. "Let's check it out," she suggested. "We can always come back if it doesn't work out." Jake agreed, and they began pushing through the dense foliage, ducking beneath branches and following a faint, barely there path. The forest was thick with ancient trees, their canopies so dense that the afternoon sun filtered through as a soft, greenish light. The clearing was smaller than it had appeared from the trail, just large enough for their single tent, but it felt wonderfully secluded and peaceful. They decided to make it their home for the night. While Riley worked on pitching the tent, Jake went to collect firewood. His eyes fell on a massive, fallen oak tree at the edge of their makeshift campsite. It had likely been toppled by a storm long ago, its trunk partially hollowed out and covered in moss and vines. It looked like a promising source of dry wood for their fire. As he pulled away branches and debris, he noticed a piece of tattered fabric. "Riley," he called out, his voice hushed and strained. "Come here." Riley looked up from the tent to see Jake standing perfectly still, his face pale as he stared at something near the base of the tree. As she approached, she followed his gaze. Partially concealed beneath a blanket of leaves and forest debris was a small piece of tattered blue nylon, a type of synthetic material used for hiking backpacks. Jake hesitated, unsure whether to touch it. Together, they cautiously began to clear away more of the debris. The fabric was connected to the remains of a backpack, its material weathered and chewed by animals, yet still recognizable. But what made Riley gasp was the sight of human bones lying next to it. Shaken, they stumbled backward from the discovery site. Jake quickly checked his phone, but as expected in this remote location, there was no cell signal. They would have to hike back to the main trail to get help. "We need to mark this spot," Riley said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her shock. "The authorities need to be able to find it again." Using bright orange surveyor's tape from Jake's pack, they marked a clear path from the main trail to the site. Then they packed their gear in a hurry and began their 3-hour hike back, mostly in silence, both trying to comprehend the grim discovery. Finally, they reached an area with cell service. Jake immediately dialed 911. "We found what looks like human remains," he told the dispatcher. "They've been there for years." The next morning, a team of sheriff's investigators and forensic specialists arrived at the location. The skeletal remains were carefully documented and photographed before being taken to the state medical examiner's office in Nashville. Dr. Sarah Kellerman, a forensic anthropologist, examined the bones and concluded they belonged to an adult male, likely between 30 and 35 years old, who had died several years earlier. The skeleton was mostly intact, though slightly scattered, confined to a relatively small area. As the investigators processed the scene, they uncovered more evidence. The tattered backpack contained several items that had endured years of exposure, including a metal camping stove with a legible serial number, a water bottle, and most importantly, a weathered leather wallet. Inside the wallet, the laminated items had survived better than the paper. A driver's license and passport, though water-damaged, were still readable. The passport's photo page was perfectly intact. The name on the documents was Michael Joseph Harris, born on March 15, 1983. Sergeant Martinez received the call that afternoon, confirming what he had suspected for a while. After 8 years, they had finally found him. DNA analysis confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Michael Harris, the solo hiker who had disappeared without a trace in April 2015. While the mystery of his disappearance seemed to be solved, one critical question remained: how had he died? Dr. Kellerman's forensic examination found no clear signs of trauma to the bones, no fractures, no cut marks, and no evidence of violence. There was some minor animal damage, which was consistent with years of exposure in the wilderness, but nothing that would have been immediately fatal. Based solely on the skeletal evidence, Dr. Kellerman concluded that the cause of death could not be determined. It could have been hypothermia, a heart attack, or any number of natural causes that wouldn't leave a mark on the bones. However, the location of the discovery was perplexing. Michael's body was found only about a quarter of a mile from the Appalachian Trail in an area that had been searched multiple times back in 2015. How had searchers missed him? Tom Bradley, a volunteer who had spent years looking for Michael, was baffled by photos of the discovery site. "I was in this area," he told investigators. "I walked through here during the original search. I'm sure of it." 3 other volunteers from the 2015 search effort also confirmed they had covered that specific ground. All of them were seasoned woodsmen who knew how to conduct a thorough search. Dr. Patricia Hayes, a forensic taphonomist who was brought in to analyze the scene, suggested a possible explanation. She explained that bodies can shift after death, especially in areas with steep terrain and heavy rainfall. She theorized that the remains might have originally been somewhere else and were moved to the discovery site over time by natural forces. But even this theory had its flaws. The backpack and other gear were found with the body. These items would likely have been scattered differently if the remains had been moved by flooding or gravity. The most compelling piece of evidence was Michael's journal. It was found inside the backpack, protected by 2 plastic bags. The journal was water-damaged, but parts of it were still readable. Michael had written in it every day of his final hike, documenting the weather, trail conditions, and his personal thoughts. The final readable entries painted a disturbing picture. April 16th, camped off trail last night, peaceful spot. Heard some odd sounds after dark, probably just animals. April 17th, hit the trail early. Keep feeling like someone's following me, but every time I look back, there's nothing there. Need to stop being paranoid. April 18th, camped again. Different spot this time, heard footsteps. No one should be out here this late. The entry ended there. The rest of the page was illegible due to water damage. The journal's final words added a new, unsettling layer to the mystery of Michael Harris's death. The shocking news of a missing hiker's discovery after an 8-year search captivated the nation. Michael Harris, who vanished in the mountains of Tennessee, was finally found, turning his disappearance into a major news story. His sister, Sarah Harris, traveled to Tennessee to identify his belongings, including his old camping gear. Seeing these familiar items brought a wave of grief and old memories she believed had long faded. While she told reporters she was grateful for the chance to finally lay her brother to rest, the mystery surrounding his death only deepened. The hiking community was especially perplexed by the circumstances of Michael's death. The location where his body was found had been extensively searched by professionals, volunteers, and cadaver dogs. It wasn't in a remote, inaccessible area. In fact, it was less than half a mile from a popular trail. This raised a significant question. If Michael died in 2015, why wasn't his body found then? The timeline of his disappearance was also puzzling. His final journal entry was on April 18th, the very same day he was reported missing. It was possible he died just hours before his family called the sheriff's office. Over the years, eerie reports from other hikers in the same area added to the unsettling mystery. In 2017, a solo hiker reported hearing footsteps echoing his own for miles without ever seeing anyone. 2 years later, a couple found their food bag, which they had properly hung from a tree, mysteriously cut down and emptied. In 2021, a group of experienced backpackers felt so unsettled that they chose to hike out in the dark instead of spending the night. While some dismissed these stories as simple wilderness paranoia, investigators wondered if they were linked to Michael's last journal entries, in which he wrote about feeling followed. Dr. Michael Proud, a criminal psychologist, was brought in by Michael's family to review the case. He noted that the journal entries revealed a man experiencing heightened anxiety. However, he also explained that such feelings of being watched are a common psychological response to the stress of a survival situation. Still, Dr. Proud admitted that certain details of the case were unusual. The fact that a body could be missed during a thorough search of an area, and the remains being tucked away under a fallen tree rather than in an open space, were both perplexing. The official cause of death was left as undetermined, an answer that satisfied no one. Michael's family longed for clarity, the hiking community wanted assurance of their safety, and law enforcement sought a logical conclusion. The case of Michael Harris officially remains unsolved, but several theories have emerged. One suggests a medical emergency, such as a heart attack or stroke, led him to crawl under the fallen tree for shelter before he died. This would explain the lack of visible trauma on his remains but not why search teams missed him. Another theory is that an accident occurred. Perhaps he fell and became injured, seeking shelter from the elements. This, too, fails to explain why the extensive search efforts were unsuccessful. A third, more sinister theory, often discussed in online forums but never formally investigated, is that Michael encountered someone else in the woods. This possibility gives his final journal entries a frightening new meaning, suggesting he was hiding from a threat when he died. Dr. Patricia Hayes, a forensic expert who specializes in wilderness deaths, believes the explanation is likely more mundane. She notes that remote environments are surprisingly effective at concealing remains due to rapid decomposition, animal scavenging, and vegetation growth. It's entirely possible, she states, that search teams walked right past his body. However, even she admits that the case is unusual, particularly given the specific, repeated searches of the area and the unsettling journal entries. Tom Bradley, a volunteer searcher who spent years looking for Michael, believes the body was moved after the initial search. He is certain he looked under the very tree where the remains were found and insists he would have seen something. He now acts as a quiet guardian of the memorial site created by other hikers. In response to the attention surrounding the case, the National Park Service has increased ranger patrols and improved trail signage and emergency communication options, though cell service remains inconsistent. Sarah Harris has moved back to Boston, but remains connected to the community of hikers who remember her brother. She receives messages from strangers who have visited his memorial, sharing their own stories and photos. She finds comfort in knowing that his love for the mountains continues to resonate with others. The full truth about Michael's death may never be known. The mountains that brought him so much peace in life seem to have claimed the secret of his final days. Was it an accident, a medical emergency, or something more sinister? The evidence is not strong enough to prove any single theory. What is certain is that Michael Harris was a man who loved the wilderness deeply and found his final resting place among the very peaks and forests he cherished. His story has become part of the folklore of the mountains, a cautionary tale that reminds every hiker of the wilderness's beautiful, yet formidable, nature. While the questions surrounding his death remain, unlike many missing persons cases, Michael's story has a conclusion, even if it is one filled with more questions than answers.